When disaster strikes, Americans show up for one another to rebuild what we've lost. It matters how we rebuild and who we are rebuilding for. Survivors and families still struggle to find stable, affordable housing. One takeaway that I've gathered already is that the United States needs to center affordable housing in its disaster response. I think this was a lesson from Katrina as well. I think what happened here is showing that we are still struggling to understand how to provide housing in the wake of disasters. Lahaina, like any area, has its own challenges and barriers to overcome in building affordable housing. But there are common root problems present from Hawaii to my home state of California. I represent Orange County, California. Expensive coastal property with geographic limitations, a lot of dependency on tourism. There's much in common, and we are struggling with many of the same root problems. We need Congress to step up and invest in affordable housing in advance of disaster so that we're not already in a shortage when we're trying to climb out. Thank you very much, Chairman Sessions. I want to start by thanking the city of Lahaina, the island of Maui, the Civic Center, and everyone, the minority staff, the majority staff. It's a lot of work to bring Congress to the American people, but field hearings, in my opinion, are one of the most important things that Congress does, and maybe one of the most underused things that we do. Our work is here with the American people. Our work is not just in Washington, D.C. So it is a lot of work, and I want to appreciate the staff and everyone, both local and from Washington, who made this field hearing happen, and thank Chairman Sessions for his leadership and his work going back many, many months to plan and to hold this hearing at the most appropriate time with the best possible set of witnesses we could have to learn and understand how to move forward. As we all know too well in this room, 1 year ago, our country suffered a horrible tragedy when wildfire flames engulfed Lahaina, destroying everything in their path. And the damage was devastating. Families lost their homes, their livelihoods, their communities, and for many, their loved ones. We're here today in part to grieve with you and to acknowledge those painful losses. But we are mostly here looking forward to reinforce the federal government's continued commitment to helping Hawaii recover. Many families were already experiencing an intense housing crisis well before the wildfire a year ago. Competition with tourists, mainlanders scooping up properties to rent as vacation homes, combined with a lack of new construction, played a part in putting stable, affordable housing out of reach for many of the families who live and work here. The wildfires supercharged Maui's housing crisis. For starters, the destruction of a chunk of Maui's already limited supply of homes further exacerbated the imbalance between supply and demand, hiking up rents across the island, even for families who were not displaced. When FEMA began providing disaster relief payments to assist survivors, some landlords reportedly took advantage of the crisis by ousting their existing tenants so they could lease to fire survivors for a higher monthly rent. State leaders have worked to crack down on this abuse, but in many cases, the damage had already been done. As Chairman Sessions has already emphasized, this hearing is not about finger-pointing or playing a blame game. We are here on a bipartisan basis to examine the response from all levels of government to last year's wildfires and to learn so that we can apply what we have experienced here to improve future disaster response. I encourage Congress to think about passing the Affordable Housing Credit Improvement Act. It currently has 125 Democratic sponsors and 114 Republican co-sponsors. The tax credits in that bill would result in building 2 million new homes. We could help unleash private capital for home construction by guaranteeing and securitizing the construction of 1 to 4 unit starter homes, just like the government already does for big apartment buildings, which may not be suitable, for example, in areas like Lahaina. We could invest in technology to make 3D printed building materials and reduce building costs by over 30%. We could center housing construction here to build component parts for houses, to be able to have high-quality housing built more quickly than is typical. And we could stop Wall Street hedge funds from scooping up all the affordable homes across our country and driving up prices for homeowners and renters alike. And we could reward cities and counties that take the step of making their building and zoning requirements more flexible. While we are going to rightly today focus on survivors who lost their homes in the wake of the fire, we are not doing enough to anticipate the underlying housing crisis that made the Lahaina wildfires such a profound shock to the housing market. So we must do more. Today we're here to listen and to bear witness. So thank you for your willingness to share your memories, your experiences, and your hopes, both painful and joyful, stories of both heroism and hardship. Mayor Bisson, I wanted to ask about, to return to housing, which is a big part of your testimony and something we talked about earlier. The truth is, we don't have enough affordable housing anywhere in the nation at this point. That's true in my home state of California. It is increasingly true, even in states that have historically had lower housing, like Mr. Sessions' state of Texas. But for a long time, Hawaii has been the most expensive state in the nation to buy a home. What's about the median typical home price here on the island?
1.2 million.
Okay. And what is about the typical median income, if you know?
Well, I know what it would take for someone to afford a home today. You'd have to earn $200,000 a year to afford buying a house now. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it would have been $76,000 to afford a home here. So that's a
huge change.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think it's just not realistic to expect people to buy a 1.2, or let's even say they get something smaller, $1 million home off a median wage, which right now in Maui, the island as a whole, is about $88,000 a year. It was too expensive to live here before the fire. So here's the point I want to make, and I want to ask the sort of panelists to respond. You can't expect the market, and Mr. Fenton, I'm kind of talking to you here too. You cannot expect the market to fix something after a natural disaster when the market was already deeply dysfunctional beforehand. So in other words, where you already had an affordable housing crisis before the fire, and what the fire has done is deepen and worsen that problem, but it has also created a spotlight on it and drawn attention to it. And just to highlight this point, from 2018 to 2023, in that 5 years in which housing prices increased, do you know how many net housing units were added on Maui?
I don't have the exact number, but it was a very small number.
According to our research,
Right.
Maui actually lost 175 units. So I think what I'd like to ask each of you to think about is, how do we improve this? We can't just rely on the market, because the market wasn't getting it done before. It's not going to suddenly get it done now. And some of the federal interventions in some ways made the market worse, more difficult. Some of them I think will help and make it better, but we just had a broken market. Right now, what share of residential zoned, what share of the island that is zoned for residential property is zoned for multifamily housing? Do you know?
I don't know the percentage, no.
It's, according to our research, a little over 18%. So that's higher, by the way, than the rest of Hawaii, which is around 7.5%. So I think we're going to need some flexibility about what types of homes we build, what kinds of materials we use to build homes, what those homes look like. And we have to do that in a way that respects the heritage, the preferences, the cultural significance. So there's no one-size-fits-all answer here. But I guess I would just say, the question I'd like to hear you sort of talk about, and I'll start with you, Mayor, is if we what do we need to change to create a better market for affordable housing in Maui? Because if we don't answer that, we're not going to be able to figure out in Lahaina where we have a fire on top of that.
Yeah, I think the first answer I would offer you is infrastructure, including water. Water is probably the greatest barrier, at least for the west side. And I know Mr. Kapu can speak to this, having lived through this for the time he's lived out here. 76% of the water on the west side is privately owned. 24% is owned by government or the county. And that is, again, one of the barriers for us to work with. I mean, of course, you can try to increase your capacity which is what we have been trying to do, which is to dig more wells to try to offer that. I mean, there are other things we can work with the private purveyors to try to acquire more of that water back. But even if you acquire the water, it's allocated by the state agency that allocates how much water we're allowed to take out of our water systems. So even if you, let's say, take over some of that 76%, that water is already allocated to somebody else anyway. So those are some of the challenges that I've learned of since becoming mayor. And part of infrastructure for us is, of course, cesspools being converted so that they can be put on the county's system, wastewater system. So increasing wastewater capacity, you must have that before you can add more homes. So I would say that's probably the biggest issue is infrastructure.
Yeah, and I think that is an area where rebuilding can give us a fresh start and an opportunity to improve. As you mentioned, before I wrap up, Ms. Name, did you want to add anything?
Yes, thank you. I wish our CEO, Michael, was here because prior to the fire, this was an area of huge focus called House Maui. And informed now by the fire, for sure that probably has to bump up on steroids. And so we're really thankful that that's going to be a continued focus for the Hawaii Community Foundation. And we also just recently hired Keanu Lauhi as my replacement, and she will cover both the Maui recovery as well as focusing on House Maui. And because she has a lot of the relationships locally here and also with the county and a lot of experience there, the hope is that there will be this collective, because as Mayor said, it's going to take state, county, community, cultural advisors to all come up with a time-bound, measured kind of goal that everybody has to shoot for. And that's going to require innovative strategies that we're learning from this disaster that we can implement to make sure that it truly is affordable based on what the median household income is.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, I think this is really a lesson for communities across the United States who are grappling with affordable housing problems that are affecting everything from rising homelessness problems, which we're dealing with in California and many other places, to being able to attract businesses to their communities. You have to get ahead of this because it just makes the recovery that many times harder. And so I encourage everyone here to continue to be in conversation with each other, but also to be innovative, because I think redoing what you were doing isn't going to get you where you ultimately need to be, because you were already in a whole a struggle before you started. And we are facing this exact same challenge in California, that rebuilding would leave us behind because we were starting from that place in terms of housing affordability. So I'll yield back. Thank you.